in my research on pre-Christian art and artifacts, you find that religious metaphor often comes in groups of three. There are the three virgins and the three graces and the three wise men, and even in Christianity we have God manifesting as three separate entities in one entity. So this idea of a threesome is a very old religious trope, which I'm using in this. And here I have Mary Magdalene as the mirror for the bearer of the ointment, the one who anoints the Christ for his death and burial. But let me just quickly interrupt myself here and say that nowhere in the New Testament is it stated that Mary Magdalene was the woman who anointed Christ. There are two scenes that is the same, where a woman, an unknown woman, comes in and anoints his head. So this is what I have inscribed here. This is in Matthew and in Mark. A woman anoints his head. And then in Luke, which is the story that has led to a myriad of paintings of Mary Magdalene with her long golden or red hair, washing and weeping at Jesus' feet. So this woman was never named Mary Magdalene. She was simply called a sinner from the city who came and did this incredibly radical thing. Whether this woman was Mary Magdalene or some unnamed woman or whoever she was, this was an amazing act of grace that this woman performed. As a woman with her loose hair, she penetrated patriarchal space where the men were eating, and she came and sat at his feet and wept. I mean, what an intimate act. And anointed his feet and kept kissing them. I mean, just an amazing woman. So whether she was Mary Magdalene or not, I honor the mirror for. And then there is a third story in John where it is told that it is Mary of Bethany who anointed his feet and wiped it with her hair. But there's no mention here of the tears or the kisses. It is this woman who did the most amazing act. And then the three figures at the bottom, also when I go into goddess lore and goddess religions, the Great Mother was understood in her three aspects, the triple goddess. She was the maiden, which is the virgin that is full of the promise of life, the mother who gives birth and nurtures and supports life from her body, and then the crone, the old woman, the postmenopausal woman like myself, who gives of her compassion to the world. So I again use the threesome here, but what I've done here is when I originally did these studies 20 years ago, I was just thinking of Mary Magdalene sitting in repentance, in quiet repentance. And then I used this mandorla shape around her, which is the vesica piscis, which is a shape that is made when two circles overlap with each other. And this is a shape that is used quite extensively in Christian art. It often frames Christ or the Virgin Mary with Christ on her lap. So I am using this opening as like the goddess opening as the space to the mother. And the mother in this case for me is the earth. She's, in legend puts Mary Magdalene in the grotto, which means she's inside the earth. She's inside the mother. So this is my connection of her, instead of being there in abject repentance for sins that she never committed, she is actually holding the connection for us between ourselves and the earth that supports us. Again, looking at the gift bearers who have been misunderstood, Pandora's gift of diversity to the world was changed by patriarchal mythographers into the evils that were let free in the world. The woman who brought the jar of ointment was misunderstood by the disciples, and then of course Eve's gift of knowledge was misunderstood as guile. Now here I am again sistering Eve and Mary Magdalene. Eve is at the tree of life, and Magdalene is at the cross, the other tree of life. And hair in biblical times was a very powerful thing. You know, Samson had his long hair where all his power resided. Women's hair were proscribed by cultural standards, whether they are covered or braided or loose. So however a woman's hair was done gives you her marital status, which means it tells you whether she belongs to the man who's either her father or her husband or whatever. So I am giving them each a braid of long hair that culminates in the head of the serpent. And the serpent in this case is the serpent of wisdom. In pre-Christian times, the serpent was not associated with Satan, was not associated with the devil in Genesis. It was actually a symbol of wisdom. So if you see an ancient sculpture of a goddess in there, somehow a serpent crawling up her leg around her arm, you know that this is a goddess of wisdom. And one of the reasons that the serpent was understood as a symbol for wisdom was because it looks like it's dying when it sheds its skin. It turns all white, its eyes cloud over. And miraculously, out of this comes this new, shiny, sinuous creature. So they were credited with incredible wisdom to be able to do this. And they were also symbols of resurrection, of life's renewal. As I said before, there are some themes that I keep repeating. Here I'm going back to the woman weeping in the cave. And I again have Neolithic symbols in the background. And she is weeping, and this river of water is running down to where we are today. I mean, this is what women do. We weep. We weep for the suffering of others and of humankind, and for the brokenness in our own hearts and in those of others. We weep. Our tears are important. And in the ones at the bottom, I call it what is handed down. And in this water are words and names that have been handed down to us. Some of them we can choose to retain, and others we may just very easily let wash away. We don't have to accept what has been handed down to us. Here again, I'm playing on the triple idea of the three miraphors, and of course of the three women in the grotto. And here I have Mary Magdalene. When I originally did these studies, I thought of her as the repentant women. This was before I did too much thinking and too much reading about what she was actually doing in her grotto. But then a few years ago, I added the labyrinth to the drawings. And the labyrinth is just symbolic of our spiritual journey, our journey to enlightenment, our journey to healing, our journey to understanding ourselves better. And then I have copper and silver and gold as the path into the labyrinth, because these are the riches that we get out of the actual earth, but it is also the symbolic riches that we get, the precious metals that we get when we go in.